Today in the Valley with Ibrahim Sagna is a special conversation bringing together the worlds of luxury, fashion, and sports in Africa. For this star-studded conversation, Ibrahim Sagna welcomes Mr. Victor Williams, a seasoned banking industry leader who is now at the helm of the NBA's $1 billion venture in Africa. They are both joined by Mrs. Laureen Kouassi-Olson, an African private equity expert who merged her investment know-how with her passion for luxury to launch Birimian Ventures, Africa's first luxury-focused investment platform. Joining the conversation is Lethabo Sithole, a South African lawyer who founded the Impact Fund for African Creatives.
We first would like to thank AVCA for organizing this eminent panel about the creative economy, which we think among the guests is one of the piece of the mountain that is being often ignored and not noticed. But I'd like to remind the audience that as we all speak and attend this conference today, the richest man in the globe is a French gentleman that runs a company called LVMH. This is at the moment where everybody talks about tech, oil and gas, and climate finance. That's the first data point. The second is, as everybody is excited about a term called unicorn that is pervasive in the technology space, which fundamentally points to $1 billion capitalization. The industry of sports has an army of teams valued at multiples of $1 billion. However, that's often not noticed. So obviously you have artificial intelligence, AI being a big theme of the days, where it is becoming unclear whether what you see on your phone is real or not. We will try to uncover what incidence, consequence, and impact it would have into the creative economy, bearing in mind that nothing happens without creators in that industry. With that background and backdrop, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Ibrahim Sagna. I chair a group called Silverbacks Holding. We invest exclusively in the creative space. We have 4 verticals, which are technology, sports, media, and lifestyle. And we've currently invested in over 240 companies. Priority sector are that, and the region is Africa, which we love dearly. I think I'm gonna start by reading a quote and hear back from you where it takes you. They say that basic brands promote the product because of its functionality. Premium brands promote the features of that product. That is the valuable improvement that is brought to bear. Luxury brands convince you to opt into their lifestyle, and the product alongside its features become side events.
I would say I would like to come back to the redefinition of luxury because, as you said, there is adoration, there is a sense of, something that is greater than us. But the reality is the reason why we have done this is to change the way people actually see us. Because when we talk about luxury today, what we don't see is the savoir-faire, the exceptional craftsmanship. And today, when we look at the African continent, we are one of the richest continents in the world with that exceptional craftsmanship and savoir-faire. But guess what? The people working into the value chain don't value at all what they're producing. So our mission, our goal, our purpose, because behind every sense of adoration, there needs to be a purpose, is really to change the way the rest of the world would see us while investing in what we have of the most precious, i.e., our designers, craftsmen, and our talents. So behind every single brand, there is actually an invaluable talent that our objective is to nurture, to structure, to elevate, to transform into a business, and then to expand internationally. So this is the reason why we have created Birimian, to be, I would say, a financial institution, not a fund, a financial institution dedicated to fostering access to finance and financing solutions for brands, creatives, and designers working into exceptional craftsmanship and value chain on the continent, promoting the excellence and savoir-faire emanating from our richest African continent. To answer your question, Ibrahim.
You obviously have now have over 3 years of operation on the African continent. What do you think is the biggest piece of opportunity investors should pay their minds to?
Thanks, Ibrahim, and thanks everyone for joining here today. As Ibrahim mentioned, I am leading the NBA's activities in Africa, and the NBA, I think, is well known as a global basketball league. But in Africa, we have a number of objectives. We're looking to really do three things. We want to grow the number of people who play the game and love the game. We want to drive engagement with our fans. And we want to build a strong commercial proposition for basketball and indeed for sports on the African continent. And that's where I think the largest interest lies with this audience. Sport has historically on the African continent been under-indexed from an economic contribution perspective. I think many of us are familiar with the pivotal roles sports plays in the US, in Europe, in other markets, where it drives a significant industry, both in terms of live events, in terms of content, media rights, infrastructure, and related development. And we believe that sports can play that same role in Africa and go from being not just about recreation, but also about significant value creation. And so in the NBA, we are looking to do that by, in addition to building up the game at the grassroots level and engaging with our fans, but looking to build a strong commercial proposition in terms of the sale of our rights, our media rights, merchandising and licensing, content rights, etc., but also in the form of building and starting a league here on the continent. So this is our third season of the creation of our own professional league on the continent, the Basketball Africa League. And we see that league as ultimately becoming an entity that can become a vehicle for value creation as well as greater development of the sports ecosystem. And with that, we want to demonstrate that sports on the continent can be profitable and sustainable financially in its own right, because that is what ultimately is necessary to for sports to attract private capital across a number of different dimensions that will ultimately enable it to play the role that it can play in the broader economy.
I will take the floor to the challenges that need to be addressed in their view to optimize their success. Whether that challenge is something the governments in the local jurisdiction need to address, or in terms of the investment community that is the direct interface.
So two things. One, I think market access and the ease of trading on the continent. I think that the AFCFTA is great, but there still needs a lot of work that needs to be done with streamlining the different regulations for what do I need to move my good from one country to another. But also, if you're working in a big production, some countries won't allow you to bring some instruments that other countries would allow you to bring. So I think that's something that governments can really work on to make it easier and less costly for creatives to do business on the continent and also to trade their craft with other continents. And secondly, I think that IP is a very important thing. I also think that we overlook the value of IP to increase the value of the work. So if you can protect your work, then you can make a lot more money from it, because then, you've got mastery and you're the one go-to person for a certain thing, and you can charge, what you see as the right amount of money for it. So I think that's definitely something to look into, protecting the work and making it easier to sell it.
Look, I mean, this is a journey, right? And so part of what we're doing is really demonstrating and living out what it means. And let's just focus on the Basketball Africa League piece, to start a professional league on the continent that is based on live events. One obvious challenge is infrastructure. Probably the biggest determinant of where we play, how long we play, is what cities have the right infrastructure in terms of arenas to host games that will deliver the fan experience and the broadcast experience and the player experience that we want. And today that infrastructure is significantly lacking on the continent. There are only a few cities where governments and or the private sector have actually invested in creating world-class arenas. So when you're running what is essentially in many ways a live events business, you need more arenas. The arenas will benefit sports like ours. It'll benefit the music industry. It'll benefit, conferences and conventions. It'll benefit a whole range of ancillary opportunities. But that's the step we would like to see more governments, in conjunction with the private sector, take, is to create more world-class arenas. I mean, and then I think, Lethabo has spoken of some of the difficulties of operating across the continent. And when we run a caravan model, so in a particular season, we'll host games this year, for example, in Kigali, in Dakar, and in Cairo. And so in many ways, we're moving that production across these African cities. The whole issue of, freight and transport and custom clearances and the like is still very, very challenging on the African continent when you're trying to run a Pan-African production. Those are two of the key challenges that I would highlight.
Today's episode is sponsored by AVCA. AVCA, the African Private Capital Association, is the nexus of private capital in the continent. It champions and enables private capital investment all across the continent. As the Pan-African industry body, AVCA plays a significant role as an effective change agent for the industry and acts as the trusted independent source of information, insight, and intelligence, inspiring investors' confidence, making the case for both commercial returns and impact for private capital in Africa. AVCA represents a community of capital allocators, investors, fund managers, advisors, entrepreneurs, and professional service providers committed to our shared vision of a prosperous Africa that is sustainable, inclusive, and innovative. We at Silverbacks Valley are big fans.
Laureen, to pick up on the challenges the panel has raised, what do you think needs to be done to permit the sustainability of the sector? Because you and I have had some of these conversations. One of the things that we observe is that luxury brand, the same as sports brand, have a bit of an immortality aspect to it. Like most of the teams you and I watch, whether it's football, soccer, basketball, the oldest team in baseball is 120 years. Most of the basketball teams are 50. And you have fundamentally no record of death. In soccer, you get released, but you do not die. In the meantime, we spend all of our lives doing investment banking or private equity in sectors where the mortality rate, in technology, for instance, where we invest a lot, that mortality rate is 95%. So you're fundamentally going into a disease and death prevalent sector. In the meantime, you have sectors where you have demigods that just don't die. And one of the biggest one is obviously luxury, because I would argue that all the companies that LVMH eventually bought, on average, they're over 40 years of age. And the person that created those brands that they're named after, that person in many cases is no longer here. And that brand continues to dominate and find subsequent buyers. So what do you think in your platform, Laureen, is essential to be done to permit that the sector prevails in the continent?
To keep it simple, to put the discussion in the context of investments, I would say that there is a concrete and straight opposition between the business model of private equity and the business model of a luxury brand. What is actually needed for a luxury brand to remain sustainable, to upscale, and remain, I would say, competitive in a highly competitive environment is the leverage of capital that can be injected into the company. So there is no secret. For a luxury brand to be successful, when you look at the Dior, Chanel, Louis Vuitton, there is a massive level of investment made into those brands to support creativity, to support artistic direction, to support production, to support distribution, to support the reinvention of themselves as sustainable brands. Guess what? Where we're coming from in the private equity industry, and Ibrahim, you've been working into that sector for more than a decade. We've worked on transactions in the past. What we have been framed with is the distortion of risk and the fact that we don't need to have our same eggs in all the same buckets. So the diversion in terms of risk mitigation is critical. So having the investment strategy where you will pick one brand and invest massively into that brand is something that our DFIs, our LPs, don't really get it right. To them, we need to have a portfolio of multiple brands, which is normal, so that there is no risk in terms of concentration. So this is what needs to be improved. The nature of the structuring of our investments, the nature of the investors who are investing into our vehicle, so that the strategy that we would like to put in place to make sure that we don't have 1,000 brands, but only one, which is successful and sustainable in the long run, can be implemented. So I think drastically the relation to time, investment, return, risk concentration, i.e. the PE classical business model, need to be reinvented to be adaptable to the luxury, fashion, creative industries, because what is key is the amount of capital, the amount of investment that can be done to sustain the growth.
We were discussing this earlier today, that an immense amount of capital needs to be put to permit defensibility of these brands. So where do you see the bullet points?
I think where we're coming from also, money is not scarce if it's rooted to the right sector. But today, the hotspots are education, health, tech, and sometimes people tend to see luxury as a distraction to us, right? Like as if we didn't have the rights to own our own luxury brand. But if you look at it from a different standpoint, i.e. the employment, the craftsmen who are working in Niger, Mali, Côte d'Ivoire, Senegal, everywhere on the continent, on something that is really precious, as to say a savoir-faire, which needs to be preserved, sustained, maintained, there is an angle where we can actually build a case. And I think building that case will also depend on our ability to financially innovate. If the sources of funding are not ready, we need to show a case to come up with innovative financial product that can support such needs until we'll get there. So it's also for us to be agile, disruptive, to come up with the solution when things are not working the way they should, but still to be convinced of the case we're building, i.e. the next generation of the future luxury brands, the way we define them with our own description of luxury, for it not to be a distraction, but a value addition and proposition to the contribution and generation of GDP for our continent and our 54 countries.
Any on AI, plus and minuses for each of your industries?
I think it depends on what we're actually talking about with respect to the creative and the fashion industry. Whether AI can be a financing tool through NFTs, for instance, I would be very cautious because we are witnessing the collapse of the NFT market, and because, there is too much uncertainty and nervosity going right now into the capital market for it to be a proper tool in terms of raising funds. Now, whether AI can be through the metaverse, for instance, a tool to expand a brand awareness and to develop ancillary sources of revenues through the metaverse, creating shops, creating collections, everything that can enhance the awareness and outreach of the Africanity of our brands and our heritage is definitely a plus. But we won't succeed if, while increasing the visibility, we don't invest into the infrastructure, and those businesses. I think we are also operating into an ecosystem as far as the fashion industry is concerned, which is still immature. So before we get there, I think we need to make sure that our foundations are really strong. And that's what we are committed to achieve while working on capacity building, access to finance, financial innovation. We'll actually writing the case maybe for the next generation to jump into all those opportunities.